In this video, we'll be talking about zeros of functions. So, first, recall that the zeros of a function y equal f of x are the x values for which f of x equals 0. The most important thing in talking about graphs of functions in regards to this is that a 0 for the function f is really an x-intercept for its graph. Namely, when we're finding zeros of a function algebraically, what we're really doing is calculating the x-intercepts. Let's go through and do that here. So here we have that 3x squared plus x minus 10 equals 0. Using the AC method, what we would have is AC equals negative 30, which means we could have x, the way we can split this up would be with a 6 and a negative 5. So in other words, we have 3x squared plus 6x minus 5x minus 10 equals 0. Splitting that up and doing the factoring by grouping and everything, you should end up with 3x plus minus 5 times x plus 6 equals 0. X plus 2. X plus 2, sorry. X plus 2 equals 0. In other words, you would get the zeros to be x equal 5 equals 5/3 from there, or x equals negative 2. What about for this one? For this one, we have that equals 0. Square root of 10 minus x squared equals 0 means that the inside would have to be 0. So 10 minus x squared would be 0, squaring both sides. In other words, either if we use the square root procedure, we would get x equals plus or minus square root of 10. So those would be my zeros. In other words, what does this mean? This means that this has y-intercepts, x-intercepts, 5/3, 5/3, 0, and negative 2, 0. 0 and negative 2, 0. Those would be my two x-intercepts. Here, my two x-intercepts for this graph, the graph of this function would be negative root 10, 0, and positive root 10, 0. Finally, that's a 0 right there. Finally, for this one, we know that, so we set the whole fraction equal to 0, and we know that a fraction is 0 only when the top is equal to 0, because there's nothing we could divide by that's large enough to make it 0. And so what we actually have is we have t equals 3/2. In other words, our only intercept, our only x-intercept should be 3/2, 0 for this function. All right. And now it's time to have you try an example. So go ahead and find the zeros of each of the following functions, and on the count of 3, I'll reveal the answer. 1, 2, 3. So you see here that first I tried to use AC, but it wasn't going anywhere. So instead I used the quadratic formula and got the zeros to be -8 and 3/2. These are both dramatically easier. Here it's t equals 25, and here we have plus or minus square root of 2. For more practice in working with zeros of functions, be sure to see the textbook page 56 and work problems number 2 and 15 through 26. In our next video, we'll finish talking about the basics of graphs by talking a bit more about graph behavior.